Hey there, this is Clay with ModernLove.life, where we help you get the great loving relationship that you're looking for without having to play mind games, without having to play hard to get, and without having to pretend to be someone or something that you are not, because I believe that you deserve to be loved for the person that you are. And if you agree with me, do me a favor by giving this video a thumbs up and by subscribing to the channel if you are not already. Also, I wanted to let you know that once again, we do have our coaching programs open for the next few days here. That's over at modernlove.life/coaching. You can find the link for that down in the description of this video as well too. But we've had a lot of interest in that. I've gotten inundated with emails and messages asking for questions about this and people's individual situations and trying to schedule a bunch of calls and things like that. So if you've written in, I'm sorry if I may not have gotten back to you just yet. I'm a little bit backlogged right now, and I'm doing my best to keep up. But I really did not think that there'd be this much of a response. But again, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of the support and everything. And if you haven't already expressed any interest in this, go ahead and do that down over at modernlove.life/coaching if that's something you're interested in. So today what we're going to be talking about is how to know if your ex is not over you. And I know that this can be a little bit of a tricky situation because, sometimes your ex will directly tell you, hey, I'm over you, get lost, or something like that. And, sure, sometimes that can be true. But there's also other times when it's absolutely not true. This brings us to, sign number one, which is what we call posturing. Now, posturing is when you're trying to put up a sort of image, a sort of illusion that you are one way when in fact you're not that way at all. And in our culture, this is very, very common. We all, when people ask us, hey, how are you doing? We'll instinctively say, oh, I'm doing fine, I'm doing good, even though that may not be how you're doing. That's great if that is how you're doing, but it may not be how you're doing. And this is especially true when it comes to breakups. When it comes to breakups, oftentimes people will try to give off the impression that they are bulletproof, that they are unimpacted by the breakup, that they are unimpacted by things that have happened with their ex, that they are bouncing back super quickly, that they never cared about their ex and all of that. And I mean, obviously, if you shared any sort of meaningful, significant relationship with your ex, that is absolutely not true. Assuming your ex is not a robot, they probably have a lot of emotional experiences wrapped up in interacting with you. And so I've noticed that it's actually very common for your ex to actually do a lot of this posturing after a breakup in order to try to either convince themselves, convince the world that they're over you, that they don't care anymore or something like that, when really the exact opposite could be true. And the way that you can really tell is, number one, you have to look at their actions as well too. You can't just base all of this off of just the words that they're saying, but you have to also look at the behaviors that they're doing out there in the world. Like, for example, if the two of you just recently broke up, then it's reasonable to say that they're probably not over you. They're probably dealing with those emotions, perhaps in a healthy way, perhaps in an unhealthy way, perhaps something in between, but they're probably still not over you. And this can happen for, years afterwards, even, decades afterwards. And don't think that just because your ex says that they are over you, that they absolutely are over you. I mean, they could absolutely be doing this posturing thing. They could be trying to either convince themselves, convince their friends, convince the world on Facebook or social media or something. We'll get to that in a moment. Or basically convince you that they're not over you, when in fact they may not be over you at all. So that's definitely one thing to keep in mind. The second sign that your ex is not over you is that they are in a rebound relationship. And I know that this might seem like they're over you. After all, they've replaced you with a new body that they're in a relationship with, so therefore aren't they over you? And the answer is no, they're probably not. If they're in a rebound relationship, and rebound relationships can be sometimes a little bit tricky to pinpoint and to identify. I did a whole video series on rebound relationships maybe about a month or so ago. You can find a link to that over here if you're curious. But rebound relationships happen because somebody is trying to hide, trying to avoid, trying to leapfrog past all of the normal emotions of grief, of loss, of all of those sorts of things that any regular person would experience after a breakup. And the thing is that you can't just like flip it off and not experience those emotions. You can't just not deal with all the baggage and the pain and the emotions from your breakup and pretend that they don't happen or that they're not there. Sure, you might be able to get from, one day to the next doing that, but, just like how if you have a broken leg, you can't just pop a few painkillers and suddenly, hey, your leg is good as new, right? Sure, it might dull the pain for a little bit, but you're not getting any better. And that's exactly the same way when it comes to rebound relationships. Either your ex is going to have to permanently bury their emotions and be emotionally dead, because you can't just selectively bury emotions. You have to either, take the whole smorgasbord of emotions, or you have to just take none of it at all. So your ex either has to become emotionally dead, which is no fun, or they have to eventually deal with those emotions, and they'll come out in weird ways, like, bickering with the rebound relationship, texting with you while they're still in a relationship with their rebound, or all kinds of weird things like that. So if they are in a rebound relationship, that's really a sign that they're not over you for many of the reasons that I mentioned in the series of videos on rebound relationships, which again, you can go ahead and check that out over in the info card area of this video. The third sign is that your ex is suddenly very silent towards you. This shows that they are not over you in a certain respect. Now, I know that we all have this idea in this little corner of the internet of no contact and the no contact rule, but you also have to understand that there's another part of the internet too that has this idea of the no contact rule. And this is that part of the internet that, says, hey, we should get over our ex, we should move on from our ex, we should, sever our ex out of every aspect of our lives. And the best way to do that, they say, is to use the no contact rule. And that is definitely an effective thing to do, but the only reason you would actually use the no contact rule is because you were not over your ex. You still had emotions wrapped up in that experience. You still had, things that you were still hung up on in one way or another, and it would just help you to heal, help you to move on, help you to deal with those emotions without having to constantly be in contact with your ex and having, your heart ripped open every time you see some sort of social media update or every time you get some sort of message from them or whatever it might be. And so your ex could potentially be trying to use the no contact rule as a means of moving on, as a means of trying to put the past behind them. So it's definitely one aspect of it as well too. Now, don't get me wrong, just because your ex is not contacting you doesn't mean that they're absolutely not over you. There are, of course, situations and circumstances, if I can get my words out right, where your ex might definitely be over you, but they might not contact you as well too. Such as if they've had the chance to really process their emotions and if they've really closed the door emotionally on the chapter of the life that they had with you, and they have like really genuinely let go of those emotions, and they're not just trying to posture, trying to be emotionally constipated or whatever it might be. So definitely kind of keep that in mind. Like with anything that I say, you have to feel into the situation and be able to know what the right application of what I'm saying is in your situation would be, or if it even makes sense in your situation, because I don't give one-size-fits-all advice. I really want you to be present in your relationship, present in your dynamic, rather than turning your brain off and then just, doing something because some guy on YouTube told you to do it. I want you to actually be able to feel into the situation and know what the right thing to do or not do is. And the only way to do that is to actually be present. So if your ex isn't contacting you, can you be present enough to say, okay, what might be going on with them that would cause them to not want to be in contact with me? Are they like really struggling with this and they're trying to, create some sort of no contact thing in order to put the past behind them or something like that? I mean, I don't know. You have to feel into it. The fourth thing is that they are potentially posting things online to intentionally trigger you, right? Now, of course, it can be really difficult to pinpoint this in many cases because, if they're posting something on let's just say Facebook, you don't necessarily know if they're doing that specifically just to poke you or if they're just broadcasting it to their 500 friends or something like that. You don't know if they're just doing some sort of life update that just so happens to trigger you or if they're intentionally doing it to trigger you. But, again, you have to feel into the situation to know kind of where they're at emotionally, what their personality is like, and all of that stuff. And if this is something that they would be capable of. And if it is, then it clearly shows you that they're not over you. They're trying to get a reaction from you. They're trying to, essentially throw like little pebbles at you to see if you'll turn around and be like totally enraged or something like that, right? They're trying to do something to get a reaction out of you. They're trying to do something to provoke you, to make you jealous, to get revenge on you in some way, to prove to you, to prove to themselves, to prove to some person or thing that maybe they're not even very clear on themselves, that they're over you, that their life is better off without you, that they made the right choice by breaking up with you, or whatever it might be. And this is, if that is what's going on, it's a very clear sign that they themselves are not over you, right? If they are being driven by such a strong emotional response, they're obviously not over you. Like once many months ago, I uploaded a video on YouTube, and like one of the first comments I got was from somebody that was like, man, I can't believe this BS. I'm totally over my ex. I've moved on. And I'm unsubscribing. And it's fine if you unsubscribe from my channel, but if the simple act of like me uploading a video is causing you to have such a strong emotional reaction, I mean, like clearly you have unresolved emotions when it comes to your breakup and your ex. And so maybe you haven't really moved on. Anyway, the fifth sign that your ex is not over you is that they have undergone a very dramatic personality change or change in behavior following the breakup. So when people break up with one another, they do so because they're trying to create a better life for themselves. And oftentimes they do this because the person that they are, the life that they have, is not working for them in one capacity or another. So they start to create an image in their mind of like, okay, how could my life be better if I was to leave this relationship? What kind of person could I be? And so they're basically trying to create a new personality for themselves that's different than the personality, than the life that they had as somebody in a relationship with you. And so sometimes people will kind of do things that are like really crazy. I get messages from time to time about people that are like, yeah, my ex broke up with me, and like now all he does is go out and party and drink all the time and do drugs and do random hookups and all that stuff. And he's like totally not that kind of person. He used to be like really responsible and shy and all that stuff. And I mean, like clearly in that sort of situation, that is that person's ex dealing with the emotions of their breakup in a really unhealthy way. Obviously they're not constructively processing those emotions. They're basically trying to drown them out with drugs and booze and sleeping around and all that stuff. But that can be what's happening. Your ex is potentially not addressing what's really going on, and they are instead trying to rearrange externals in their life, hoping that if they just rearrange the external factors in their life, that somehow it's going to create a new internal world for them. But the unfortunate truth is that, wherever you go, there you are. It's like if you move to a new city and you want to create a new life or something like that, you can do that, but you're still going to be the same person and the same personality unless you actively do some internal work in order to change that. It's not just like, hey, here I am in Seattle, and then, hey, here I am in, I don't know, Los Angeles or something, and suddenly I'm going to be a different person. No, it's gonna be a factor of something deeper, like how I'm putting myself into the world, how I'm intentionally bringing myself to the world. And sure, sometimes changing the external circumstances can be a good catalyst for real change, especially if the old circumstances, the old external circumstances are stifling you in some way, or the new circumstances are really encouraging you to thrive in some way. But ultimately, it really has to be you that's going to own a new personality. It's going to own a new version of yourself, and it can't just be related to things that are happening outside of you. So if that's what your ex is doing, clearly they're not over you. They are still dealing with it in kind of a probably not so constructively, especially if they're doing the whole drugs and booze and sleeping around and partying all the time kind of stuff. There's nothing wrong with that from time to time, but, that's not really a very good long-term lifestyle. Anyway, this has been Clay. I hope this has helped you figure out if your ex is over you or not. If you like what we're doing here, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. And if you are interested in coaching, we have the coaching programs open for enrollment until Wednesday of next week. So you can go ahead and check those out over at modernlove.life/coaching. Those will be open until Wednesday when we will close them up. The reason for that is because, like you guys don't know this, but when I take on coaching clients, it's always it seems like it should be a really simple process, but it's really a big ordeal because you got to coordinate schedules with people. You got to say, hey, when are you free to talk to see if we're a good fit for one another? Then you got to deal with time zone differences. Then you actually have to have the phone call, and then you have to like do all that stuff. So because there's all these phone calls involved, because there's all this back and forth and emails and stuff like that involved, it kind of takes a little bit of time. So I need to close this eventually so that there's not just people coming in nonstop. And then I'm just going to take, the next week or week and a half or so and work through all of those applicants and make sure that, if they are a good fit to work with me, that we can get that set up. If they're not a good fit to work with me, then we can say, hey, do you want to do the group coaching thing? Or if not, then, hey, that's okay. We don't need to work together at all, or, whatever. I just have to move people to the right places. And then after that, we'll start the group coaching course. Anyway, once again, if that's something you're interested in, check it out at modernlove.life/coaching. And I'm sorry if you've written into me and I have not written back to you yet. We've just gotten so many messages. It's a massive backlog, and I'm doing my best to keep up. But anyway, thanks so much. Let's see if we got any questions in the chat area today. Okay, KY says, my ex said that she does not want me in her life and that she doesn't want me to contact her even though it's been several months of no contact. It hurts, but how can I turn the situation around? Okay, so when your ex does not want to be in contact with you, you have to look at what's going on an emotional level, okay? I don't know the specifics of your situation, but if your ex is still holding on to some sort of hurt feeling, some sort of pain, some sort of emotional baggage or something like that from the breakup, then you need to get clear on that, okay? I know that there's two sides to every story and that you may think that you acted perfectly acceptably for whatever the situation was, and maybe you did even act that way, but your ex may not have that same perspective, and she might see things differently, again, because like what we've talked about before, sometimes your ex has to delete, distort, and generalize in order to create a version of you worth breaking up with in their own mind. So your ex may have deleted, distorted, or generalized actions, behaviors, and things that you did and all of that in order to create a version of KY that is a jerk, a person worth breaking up with. And so she could still be holding on to pain, hurt, resentment that she feels as she's, interacting in her mind with this version of you that may not even be real, but, could be real. Again, I don't know the situation. I don't know all that stuff. So if you do need to, you need to get clear with her on what happened. If you need to let her know that you're sorry for anything that you did that you actually feel bad about, that you want to take responsibility for. You need to reflect back to her how you imagine that made her feel. You need to explain to her what motivated you to behave in that way. And you also need to let her know that you see and hear where she's at on an emotional level. And that can be a great way to help her to let go of the pain that she might be holding on to that's stopping her from wanting to interact with you. Another consideration, if you've dealt with that one, that's probably the big one, but then there's small little things beneath that could potentially be things worth looking at. But a smaller one beneath that would be that you might potentially be contacting her in the wrong way. Now, again, I don't know your situation personally. I don't know if you've stumbled across this corner of the internet recently or if you've been binge watching a bunch of these videos or not. But obviously there are ways that you can contact somebody that is going to be less effective and ways that you can contact people that are going to be more effective. If you've been in the whole breakup world for a while and you've been trying to get back together with your ex for a while, you probably know that begging and pleading and apologizing a million times and all that stuff is not going to be very effective. Most of us, when we first go through the breakup, we go through that period where we initially do that and it doesn't work, which leads us to explore other facets of this whole thing. but obviously that's an extreme example. There are a lot of ways that people can contact their ex, that people can be in communication with their ex, that are going to be broadcasting a sort of similar vibe of like, hey, I have a hidden agenda. Hey, I'm not considering where you're at on an emotional level, and I'm only considering what's important to me, which is that we get back together so that I can feel better. And I'm not really interested in your personal experience. I'm not really interested in seeing things from your point of view. And, obviously you're, at least hopefully, not overtly saying that, but there are actions that you can take that are going to be sending that message to her, regardless of whether or not you're overtly saying that or whether or not you're overtly intending that. For example, like if you're very relationship focused, if all you want to do is talk about the relationship, talk about why the breakup happened, talk about all of that stuff, that can send that message to your ex. Whereas what I often advise people to do is to take the focus off of the outcome of being in a relationship and to focus it onto the process of actually connecting on an emotional level with your ex in the present moment. Because if you can have that emotional connection that strengthens the two of your bonds with one another, then that is when, you can actually build up that emotional foundation to the point where she might actually want to interact with you more. She might actually want to spend more time with you. She might actually want to get back together with you. And then, the getting back together part becomes the natural, organic result of building up that emotional foundation. But if you're just focused on the relationship, focused on the commitment, focused on getting back together, then number one, you're not focused on the emotional connection. And number two, you're sending a message to her that could potentially be saying, hey, I'm not interested in your emotional experience. I'm not interested in how you feel hurt. I'm not interested in the pain that you're going through. I'm not interested in your perspective or your side of the story. I just want to get back together. And that is like a major turnoff for a lot of people. So you also want to really look at the specific things that you might be saying to her as you're contacting her, and really looking at and saying like, okay, if I put myself in her position, if I see this message through her eyes, if I listen to this thing that I'm about to say through her ears, how is she going to take it? Is she going to take it and say, oh wow, KY really gets me? Oh wow, KY really understands me? KY is really empathetic to how his actions have affected me? Or is it going to come across as like, hey, I don't care how you feel, I'm just wanting us to get back together so I can tick the box, update my Facebook status, and say I'm in a relationship again, and move on. So you just really have to be careful about this stuff. I know it can be really tricky, but if you start to really get in the practice and in the habit of putting yourself in someone else's perspective, it will become a whole lot easier, to the point where you can even do this like in the moment as you're having a conversation with somebody and as you're interacting with somebody in real time, okay? I think we've got some time for maybe one or two more questions. Okay, got to scroll back to the top. Okay. Hello from Orlando. Hi, Kim. Thanks for tuning in from Orlando. Again, never been to Florida. I know a lot of people live in Florida. I know a lot of people seem to watch me from Florida. I have heard many things about Florida, but I've never been there myself, so I cannot make any comment about whether Florida is amazing, whether it's terrible, whether it's somewhere in between, whether it's who knows what. But I might end up there one of these days. I keep feeling drawn to Florida for some reason. Not sure where exactly, but we'll see. Okay, let's see. Oh, that is a difficult to say name. Is it Boomesh? Again, it's hard to, it's a difficult to say name, and I also can't get too close to the camera, otherwise you see right up my nose, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm trying to squint and read these tiny little letters from far away on my screen here. But okay, anyway, Boomesh, I think, says, I have had a good transformation and contacted my ex after a couple of replies. She didn't want to speak. I agreed and said, see you later. Do I wait? She is still holding on to a lot of resentment. What do I do? Okay, yeah, so I do probably what I just recommended to KY, which is to try to get her to let go of that pain and resentment. Now, it can be tough because you've kind of painted yourself into a corner. She says, hey, don't contact me, and you've said, okay, great, I won't contact you. And there's a part of you that's not okay with that. There's a part of you that really does want to stay in contact with her, okay? And so it's kind of tough because you've again, painted yourself into a corner. So if you are going to contact her, you have to go against what you said previously. You have to go against what you actually did, which is going to perhaps compromise your integrity in some degree or other in her eyes, and that can be difficult. But one thing that you might consider doing is, I'm trying to think this through here. So one thing that you might consider doing is contacting her to clear those things away, much like what I just described to KY, but do so in a way where it's like, hey, I know that we agreed not to talk to one another, but this has really been eating me. I just wanted to let you know that I'm, sorry for hurting you in whatever way, and I imagine it impacted you in whatever way, and at the time I was not thinking of you, I was only thinking of myself for whatever reasons, and all that stuff. And if you just left it like that, she might be able to let that slide by and be able to let go of those hurt feelings that she's holding on to, that resentment, I guess you said it was, that she's holding on to, and potentially open back up again. And then she might try and initiate a conversation with you and have a actual dialogue with you. But that's probably the best, most direct way that I can think of off the top of my head. Again, without knowing more of the details. But anyway, hope that helps you out. And let's see if we can do one more. Scrolling through these comments. X keeps breadcrumbing me, sends a text once a week for arbitrary reasons. I don't know if I should respond. I want to turn the conversation in order to redevelop an emotional connection, but everything is surface level, missing a pair of shorts, picking up her mail. We chat, and then she disappears for another week. I feel like 100% no contact may seem rude due to the circumstances. Okay, James, so yeah, it's good that you're feeling into the situation and trying to figure out what the right thing to do is based off of your situation, based off of the specifics of what you're going through. Again, I don't want you to just kind of turn your brain off and just do something because somebody on YouTube said to do it. That's one of my frustrations, is that everybody seems to have this superstition that you should be doing no contact all the time, no matter what happens. And that is not true, in my opinion. With that being said, if your ex is breadcrumbing you, I doubt that she is probably, I think it was a woman. I don't remember. I'm just going to assume it's a woman. I don't know if you said, but I'm guessing that she's probably not doing this because she's evil, because she is a, vindictive, wicked person or something like that. If she is that way, you probably would have noticed this during your time together, and hopefully you would have not wanted to be in a relationship with an evil person. So I doubt that she's using you. I doubt that she's stringing you along, unless you believe that she has that within her to do that. But again, I don't know her. You do, so you have to make that call. And then I'm guessing she probably is trying to have some sort of connection with you, but she's perhaps a little bit frustrated that the conversation seems to only stay at this surface level. And then because it's only staying at this surface level, she gets frustrated and gives up. She doesn't want to just sit around talking about the weather or talking about traffic or talking about work or talking about Game of Thrones or whatever it is. And she wants to actually have some sort of deep emotional connection. So what I'd recommend you do is to shift it down to the emotional level. As you're talking about, I don't know, something that happened in her day or something like that, try to shift it down to the emotional level. Ask her, what was that like for you? Tell me more about that. How did that make you feel? Something along those lines, and suddenly that'll get her talking a little bit more on a deeper level. And then you can relate to her based off of those emotions that she starts to share with you. Rather than talking about surface level things like TV shows or whatever, you can be talking about emotions, talking about like, hey, I felt a similar way when this thing happened to me, or I wouldn't blame you for feeling that way. I would feel this way too. I felt that way when this happened to me, or when that happened to me, or that reminds me of the time that I felt a similar way at this experience or whatever. And suddenly you're having this like back and forth based on emotions instead of based on surface level circumstances like, you know, sports or something like that. And that's where real deep emotional bonds start to happen that can really open you up. So anyway, hope that helps you out. Okay, guys, gotta get back to like a bunch of emails, but thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, if you like what we're doing, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And if you are interested in coaching, it's not too late to sign up. You can go check us out at modernlove.life/coaching. We will be accepting people for the next couple days up until Wednesday. Then we'll close the doors and deal with all the people that have gotten in before then, put them in the right places, decide who we're going to work with, who is not a good fit, who is a good fit, and then we will get started with the group coaching